You've heard of heroic labs by now, and we keep talking about them because in today's mature market, you need every edge to be successful. Rather than spending those precious company dollars on building game tech, focus on building your game and shipping it. Get into your players' hands faster and grow your community. Heroic Labs is battle-tested partner and friend of the podcast. Their tech enables you to be flexible, creative, and scale for success. Heroic Labs has your tech stack covered. Whether you're looking for a world-class back-end game server, an amazing game development framework, fantastic live ops tooling, or reliable mass scalability, Heroic Labs has solutions for all of these challenges. And it's not just us at Deconstructor of Fun praising Heroic Labs. The company works with some of the world's biggest publishers on many of the beloved games. Focus on your game, save a big chunk of cheese, and avoid tech risks with Heroic Labs.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Games, TWIG 301. I'm going to call it 300.5 or 300 and a half because we're going to continue celebrating the 300 episode milestone. We also read and distill all the weekly game industry news so you don't have to. A lot of great news for us to chat through today. Also, we are the only video game podcast that has two of the hosts who say Mario, and the rest of us shake our heads. So there you go. So here's what we're talking about today. Adam and Laura are here to do their TWIG histories, some acquisition news at Playtika that we're kind of wanted to deep dive into. It's kind of exciting. Dreamhaven has an announcement, and RIP to Everdale again. I guess it's died twice now. I'm Jen Donahoe, strategic marketing consultant at Jade Inferno and Beta Hat. Today we have Philip Black, game economist at Game Economist Consulting.
Let's cook.
Eric Kress, principal at Gossamer Consulting Group.
Yo.
And the two Mario fans, Adam Telfer, product extraordinaire, 20 years making amazing, amazing products and shooters and HD things. I'm just going to elaborate because I'm not allowed to talk about where you work anymore. Or am I allowed?
No.
Laura Taranto, Senior Director, or Toronto, since we're all making fun of mispronunciations today, Senior Director of Product at Big Fish Games.
It's me, Laura.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Mr. Telfer, do you have a shill?
Okay, let's get into a shill. So I'm supposed to shill for the blog. Miska wrote a piece, AI game industry in 2025, the unspoken part. Have you guys actually read the article yet?
Not yet.
Nobody's read it yet.
Unread part right now.
Okay. Well, let's be real here. He wrote it with ChatGPT. He didn't splurge for 4.0 or for 0.1. Let's just come on. Like,
Oh.
I read it, and to be honest, right from the beginning, I was surprised because I scrolled down and basically his face covers like half the blog. His image of his face is half the blog. And then I think he's just gone like full-blown cynical now in his retirement. Like the big quote from this is that AI will lead to a massive drop in quality of games in the short term, which like comparing Kress to Miska, this is like pretty cynical. I think we should start getting worried about Miska in his retirement now. Overall though, like my take, if you would ask me about AI, very impressive technology, taking leaps and bounds every cycle. It's leading to efficiencies in art, programming, and design. And that efficiency right now is mostly focused on smaller visible areas, so not player-facing things. So things like documentation, refactoring code, working through compilation errors, summarizing documents. It's your MBA intern, your pair programmer, your personal concept artist right now. And I think right now we're starting to see a higher impact where sort of procedurally generated content was already a thing. So for example, level design in Match 3, generating cosmetics in terms of patterns and textures. But open question to you guys. Do you guys use AI in your day-to-day? Because I'm finding I'm going full-blown AI, trying to add as much of it to my day-to-day as possible.
Every day. I'm going to be doing some podcasts upcoming with AI companies for a couple different things. One is a really cool company from Layer.ai who does art for your games and for your UA. You can train your own model on your own assets. And so you're like, hey, I want this character in a plumber outfit with a big M on the hat. And then it'll kind of do that for you. There's also an amazing company that does UA optimization called Replay.ai, where it takes all of your UA, figures out competitively what works the best and automatically stitches the new videos together. And then the platform tests it for you. And within a couple, like 10 days, gives you a winner and then runs it. Like what you can do now with art and creative is fantastic. And then there was news that, so this is like from the theatrical group, Lionsgate did a deal with this company called Runway that does video AI. And even though the writers group got this whole AI deal, Hollywood's going to go full AI and train all of their video assets with a video model and then have it do storyboarding and all of these different things. So if you're not in gaming and paying attention to this Lionsgate Runway deal, you should absolutely be doing that. Like imagine, put all the levels of Call of Duty you've ever played into a video and then have it run like compilations for you to storyboard, like a new level design. I don't know. There's so much stuff. All right. That was a lot. Kress, you
What are we talking
AI.
about? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You lost me.
AI.
AI. All right.
Don't worry, Kress.
We'll move on.
Don't
All right. So I actually have the craziest shill. I'm going to shill Phil because
No, stop it.
yeah, no,
Just stop.
no, we always fight.
Party's just getting going.
We always fight. And then I was like, all
All
right,
aboard.
let's do a project together. So we're working on this project. And like, he's a number savant. He's a guru. He's
Oh,
like
God, stop.
Swiss Army
God,
knifing
even I need to stop this.
God.
the shit. I
Throwing up in my
dude,
mouth
I was
right now.
I was impressed. I had a chance to Wonder Twin it up with Stan at Beta Hat. And now, like he's, Phil's the Robin to my Batman or the Hawkeye to my Black Widow or whatever.
Can we cut all this out?
No, just put it on loop. I'm making a soundboard.
All right.
Thank you for
Yeah.
the kind words, Jen.
Oh,
It goes both ways.
No,
I've seen you tear it up.
it's been fun. Hey, we shit on Phil all the time. I thought I'd say something nice about him. All right, Kress.
Just this once.
Corrections. The question here on the script is any corrections or apologies for the EA strategy attack last week? And a resounding absolutely no. I got nothing but kudos for expressing the opinion that the strategy guys should not be talking about AI and game development. So I think 4 or 5 people from EA were like, thank you, thank you. Now, I want to make clear, there's nothing personal against this dude. I don't know him. I don't know anything really all about him. It's more about the idea that some McKinsey douche is up there talking about video game development after 4 years experience in gaming. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with this guy personally. Supposedly he's a cool dude. So that's it. That's all I got.
That's all I asked from you, is to be able to at least say, like, Mahir as a person is a good person. In terms of the content that was presented, you have real issues with it, which I totally agree with.
You're too Canadian
Yeah,
and you're
of course.
too nice.
Yeah, that is true.
Just generally speaking. It's like
Too
a,
nice.
It's like a disease.
Yep.
Canadian.
Yep. Well, I
Yeah.
feel personally attacked. You went after Toronto, so I had to.
Oh,
That's true.
I forgot.
I forgot about that part.
I
right?
forgot about that.
Toronto, dude.
Yep.
It's where all the fucking McKinsey people retire, right?
Yeah.
In
I know.
their ivory towers.
We'll chip away at you, Kress, right? But these EA people coming out and just emboldening you, we've got to soften you up a little bit.
One of my clients I talked to yesterday was like, I was listening to this conference and I was laughing out loud knowing what your reaction was going to be. She's like, I could not help myself thinking about what you are going to say about this guy talking at this conference, because she was as outraged as I was. And she's like a huge shareholder, right? It's like, what the fuck? Like, all right, so that
Yeah.
get me going again. What were they thinking? I mean, it's like, it's insane,
Yeah.
So whatever. It was mean. I admit it was mean.
Yeah. We also didn't mention that they spent, I think, a total of 1 minute on mobile in the entire presentation.
Of course they did.
But, it just goes to later on when we talk about acquisitions and how other people are looking at mobile. It's really interesting. All right, so let's get into the continuing the fun for the 300 celebration. I actually got a lot of positive feedback from listeners who, many of them are newer and didn't know a lot of the origin stories. And so Adam and Laura, since we didn't get a chance to hear from you on your stories and your Wayback Machine, would love to hear a little bit more. Adam, why don't you go first?
I was writing on Deconstructor back in 2015, 2016. Like, that's how I got kind of pulled into Deconstructor as a community. The weird story there is that actually I wrote a book back in like 2012 on mobile game design. I think it's still actually like available for pre-order on Amazon. If you look up my name.
Wait, did you publish it?
No, because I basically.
Did you
it was
take
supposed to
money?
be no, I didn't.
Okay.
It was a small book, and basically the publisher pushed me to make it into like a textbook. I didn't have time for that shit. So we killed it. And then I posted all the articles online. Those articles ended up getting a whole bunch of people talking about mobile game design. And then that's when Miska was like, hey, I want you to write for Deconstructor, which at the time, like I was just a nobody. So I was like, sure, why not? Write about some games. But yeah, you're one of the podcasts. I was listening to Miska, Kress, and Joe. I was a fan and asked to come on as a guest. And actually, JK drove over, lent me his mic. And then after that first episode, Kress called me up and said that I was both smarter and more articulate than Miska. So he wanted me to come on the podcast. So that was good.
Poor Mishka. He's getting the short of the stick here.
But that was true, right? Do you remember that call? Because I remember that call.
Dude, that's not what you wrote. That's not what you wrote there. I was like, I don't even understand what that meant, but I know exactly what you're saying. That's exactly what I said.
Because I want a real response. You guys keep cheating and reading my text. I want a real response from Kress.
No, that's exactly. I want a real product guy. Yeah, that knows products.
Yeah, in terms of like the top correct calls and the top flops. So like in general, I think we look good, throwing from the cheap seats because we mostly say games will not succeed and the market has a very low hit rate. I think one of the more correct calls we made was about web shops. So remember, Sufert was actually pushing back to Kress and I, saying that web shops would not take a meaningful share from App Store. And Kress and I both pushed back on just due to the nature of free-to-play and top spenders. Also, subscriptions. I think that was like the thing we kept beating on every single twig way back in the day. We were skeptical of Game Pass really on day one. And Web3 as well. Sorry, Ethan, but there was one episode, and I forget who it was with. We brought in a guest host, and I actually genuinely feel terrible because we just destroyed him on that podcast of like just the level of like, what the fuck are you talking about, and how badly we barraged him with doubt. But besides that, I think we spotted some design issues early in a bunch of games like Diablo Immortal and Warcraft Rumble. Top flops, I have scar tissue here because when I do call it wrong, I do really appreciate when people come up and say that I got it wrong. And usually it twists my brain and like changes how I perceive the market. So for example, on COD Mobile, we had a bet in terms of like the year one revenue the COD Mobile will actually release. And the COD Mobile team told me that they took my number and they posted it on the wall and they said, we're going to beat it. So they quickly ramped up cosmetics production. And then they released in China all within that year, and they blew past that number, right? Yeah. So that's a humble brag. I'm sorry. But that.
Do you have a wanted poster somewhere? Imagine throwing darts at you or like effigy.
Yeah. No, my quote's up there on the wall too, evidently, according to the Call of Duty guys.
Yep.
Something.
Besides that, like I did call Marvel Snap wrong, called Brawl Stars wrong, called Apex Legends wrong when it first launched. And I think the worst one I got called, I was bullish on Dr. Mario on mobile. And I sincerely apologize. I can go back to the recording, but I was bullish on Dr. Mario on mobile.
Were you really?
Yeah. Because I'm a Dr. Mario fan. Like that was one of the parts that like scarred me of like, no, I have to match Kress's cynicism. Otherwise, I'm not going to look smart on this podcast.
Oh my God. My wife is a huge Dr. Mario fan. Mario. I'll say it Canadian. On the OG Nintendo, we had to buy like a TV with a tube in it because we were playing Duck Hunt with the zapper. Anyway, that's my connection to your failure. Laura, what are your Mario stories?
My Mario stories. So I'll start with the history. So the reason I got involved with Deconstructor Fun was because of Adam. Adam and I met in like 2013 when we were both working at Wooga, and then we became friends. So I've known Adam, oh my God, 13 years now. It's been a while. And he was already part of DOF. And Heyday Pop had just launched. And I was like, oh, I could write an article. How hard could it be? Well, Adam kindly offered to edit. And it was a much more labor-intensive process than I had expected for me and for poor Adam, who had to edit and try to get me focused on, all right, remember how to write essays, Laura? You gotta make a proper thesis. You gotta support that thesis. At one point, I think I wanted to throw my laptop against the wall, and I was just like, no, I hate this. This is a terrible idea. But then I finished it, And that was the first one. And then even though it was hard, I feel like I got a little craving for it. So then I started writing more and more articles. So I think if I remember correctly, my second one was the Royal Match article. And that's probably my most popular article. I haven't checked. I haven't actually looked at the numbers, but that's the one that's gotten quoted back to me the most time. So I'll be sitting, this was probably a couple of years ago, and someone would be like, have you read this article on Royal Match? I'm like, yes, I wrote it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So that's how I started. And then I joined around the 200th episode. So I've been on about 100-ish here or there episodes. And I posted this when we were kind of ramping up to this 300 celebration, because I either had the great misfortune or great fortune of sitting next to Kress after crashing the DOF Istanbul dinner for the first big event. I wasn't a speaker, but I knew all the speakers. I knew most of y'all that were there. And I was talking to Mishka, and he's like, it's fine. I know everyone here. I helped work, and I can get you come to dinner. It's totally okay. I'm like, Mishka, I wasn't invited. I feel like that's very rude and inappropriate. And he was like, no, it's fine. So I get on the bus, and actually I was sitting next to Matei and Felix first, having a grand old time. And then my seat got shuffled, and they sat me down next to Kress, who I didn't really know. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm at a table with people I don't know at all. And then we got to talking, and then I think there was some need for some mobile or some casual. And then I kind of did a couple episodes, and now I've been on and off covering casual mobile for about 100 episodes. Yeah. So top correct calls, probably too old to mention, but I'm going to mention it anyway. A lot of times when I write these articles, I write them in soft launch, or my calls are in soft launch. And Royal Match, I wrote in soft launch. That I'm very proud of. I'm also proud of the Match Factory call. I think that Kress and I went head to head, and Eric was like, "No, it's mice nuts. That's the mice nuts." And I was like, "No, it's a game. It's gonna be something." For Clash Quest, that was actually, I think my prediction was it wasn't going to find product market fit. I think that was correct. I want to give myself credit for Monopoly Go. I knew it would be big, except I was wrong in part of it, in that I didn't think it would outpace Coinmaster. I thought it was going to do very well, but not outpace Coinmaster. And I believe that was what I said on whatever episode it was that we did it. And that part was wrong. The part that was big was right, but how big it was wrong. I'm actually much better at calling flops. And what else?
I think all of us are, right?
Well, I'm not going to share it here, but I actually keep a list. I actually keep a list of all the games I call, so I can keep an accuracy rating. I have a good sense of a mobile game, especially a casual puzzle game. Apparently, I have a terrible sense for hardware. And Kress was right. Apple Vision Pros just didn't revolutionize the AR, VR space as I thought it would. I'm hoping I can add yet to that maybe in the future.
Understatement of the century.
Yeah, that was probably my biggest public flop. I've been very bullish on AR, VR, Apple's tech for way too long.
All right, well, let's go a little more into the future. Well, actually, let's go into the past. So for the last 5 years, one of the topics we were talking about last week was, what's changed for the better and for the worse in the industry, or what's really funny as we look back on, industry trends and things that we've talked about. So Adam, I wanted to get your perspective on that, because you lived and breathed so much of this from so many different big companies, genres. What's your take?
Yeah, I guess I'm coming at it pretty pessimistically, but I would say that if I look at 2019 to 2024, versus the 5 years prior, so 2014 to 2019, I'm surprised about how little has changed. In terms of mobile, you have kind of the maturation of the platform over time. On HD, you have the rise of live services in that earlier window. So you had launches like Destiny, Overwatch, Fortnite, Apex, PUBG, all happening within that window. Versus now 2019 to 2024, on mobile, you have the post-IDFA slump with substantially fewer breakouts each year. And on HD, there really has only been about 2 breakout live services, Overwatch 2 and Valorant, with sort of 2 to 3 breakout premium games per year. So in general, it's that slowness, right? Like what makes me sad and overall is just that decline of creative risk taking. Because if I go back even 5 years prior, from 2009 to 2014, in mobile, that was an explosive time when all the time we were looking at the top grossing charts and a new game would pop up. and just that diminishing curve in terms of creative risk taking, the amount of new breakouts that happen each year. So that's the part that I think has made me sad. But in terms of what's made me excited and for better, has been the games that do break out and are bold, consistently challenge our assumptions of what's going on in the market. So I still believe that there's sort of underpinnings in the market and signals of like player value, what players actually want to play is changing from year to year.
Telfer just said something and it reminded me of a post that Matei put in the Slack around, Kress, stop talking about IDFA killing everything.
I don't mean it as IDFA killed everything, because obviously there still are successful games. I think Nebo actually had a really good post, which Matei referenced, right? Around the nature of new games coming up. I think we can all agree it had an impact on the mobile industry.
Absolutely.
It was not the apocalypse that was predicted, but it did have an impact.
And the secondary impact of like removing fingerprinting was what didn't happen, which would have been basically the death knell of user acquisition. I'm going to agree with Adam. I don't think things have changed all that much in the last 5 years. I think, obviously Apple's draconian privacy policies kind of dropped a market that was growing at 20% CAGR down 5 for 2 years, which is an insane drop. Even with the COVID bump and COVID hangover, there's still huge upending of the user acquisition system, destroying stocks like Facebook, Unity, AppLovin, Digital Turbine. Digital Turbine and Unity are still recovering, right? They may never recover from what Apple has done. I would say that the emerging UGC platforms, again, like obviously Roblox has been around for a long time, but Epic with UEFN, but I still think that's TBD as to how much that's going to scale and change how people consume content. And of course, you can't stop. You can't. You got to have to say, the innovative game design at Netflix, right? They're really challenging how we define interactive, right? I mean, they've been on the scene, dude, and doing some amazing stuff. Sarcasm. Okay. But my whole point, and I've been saying this for a while, is that we are in a mature industry for both mobile and console, and we've not really seen any new emerging genres coming out of either platform. Right? Like Guitar Hero, Rock Band, Toys to Life, and Wii for the consoles of the older generations. Mobile, like, really hasn't seen anything new in a long time besides like Pokemon Go. That was a while. So again, it just seems like the same old type of games or same old genres with different executions and innovations around the executions and not necessarily innovations on new type of gameplay. So
I feel like, Kress, I feel like you've been like staring at IDG forecasts a little bit too much. Like, because like in general, like when we just talk about macro genres, like shooters, right? You're kind of blanketing, looking back at the last like decade and being like, shooters haven't changed. Shooters are still dominant. It's like, but then if you go one layer deeper, you're like, no, shooters have pretty fundamentally changed in the last 10 years.
What?
We assume that things like Call of Duty had a complete lock on the market. And now we're looking at it and saying, no, actually, Fortnite dominates the shooter market.
Well, how long has Fortnite been around?
2017.
Wait, what time period are we talking about?
Well, I don't know. Which one are you talking about?
5 years.
The last
guys.
5 years.
5
Okay.
years.
Yeah, no, I'm poking at the Wii and Guitar Hero and Rock Band nostalgia that you're going back to. I'm like, holy shit. I think things have changed since Wii, right? Like I'm looking back at my shelf. I'm like, yeah, the Wii games are a little different now.
But to Eric's point, like Battle Royale is equilibrium for shooters. Like no one has figured out what's after Battle Royale, to his point. Like there has been some equilibrium finding in a lot of these genres. I still think you're ignoring some market segments which have emerged. Like tower defense has come out of nowhere. Like this thing has just been like revived. It's been necromanced into life again. Like Rush Royale, Arc Knights, like they successfully integrated the squad RPG paradigm into reviving tower defense in a new format, which blew my mind. Action RPG with Genshin, Diablo, Survivor.io were the roguelikes on mobile. And we're just talking about mobile. UGC platformer, Eggy Party, Stumble Guys.
The one thing I'll say though is, in terms of trends, the Souls-like and roguelike thesis around saying that like roguelikes are coming up is the new thing has been in the thing for over a decade.
On mobile or
no, everywhere, like on PC, console, mobile. Even when like go back 10 years ago when roguelikes were getting big on PC, right? Everyone was like, oh, all of these things are going to come over to mobile and it's going to be the new biggest thing. We're still waiting. We're still waiting.
Okay. I agree with you on the Genshin thing. I think Genshin like solved a riddle that was vexing, right? How do you make an action RPG on mobile that does really well and has monetization, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was an amazing thing. Survivor.io. I would say Eggy Party and Summer Guys, sure, but that's such a small games, like on a revenue basis, but whatever. But I want to be clear on this point because look, in 2012 to 2018, we saw insane amounts of things being made, just throwing the shit at the market to see what sticks, right? We saw social casino, and a lot of them were conversions from what was going on the web or going on the Facebook canvas, et cetera. But we had social casino, 4X, puzzles, simulation games, card-based battle games, squad RPGs came out of nowhere. Puzzle RPGs came from Asia, but they were innovative and modified for the US. Almost everything was kind of new in the mobile space to some degree, or created for the mobile space. And I just think we're just not in that mode anymore, right? I mean, investments of dev are way too big. Bringing things to market are more and more expensive, and people are just taking less creative risk and doing less innovations. It's all incremental, right? And it's just the nature of the mature market that we're in for both mobile and console. I don't think it's kind of a feature, not a bug in some ways, in terms of how big this market has become. So I don't know.
I feel like cross-platform layers on to that as something kind of newer. That when you think of Genshin's success, number one, it's the meta system that they put around everything, and the way that they've monetized the hell out of that and hired what feels like an army of 2,000 more people kind of live opsing the shit out of a game, and then taking it cross-platform and having that be a seamless experience for players. No, that model feels like the things that's going to be table stakes and successful for folks going forward. I don't know how you feel about cross-platform as a thing.
I think there's a lot of overhype on cross-platform, just generally speaking, but I think you're right. That is a trend that's happened over the 5 years.
Yeah. Laura?
I agree with both. So at least for casual mobile, everything feels stale, but I know it's not. If I look at the past 5 years, we had Grid Merge, which is the Merge Mansions and all the copies and every Gossip Harbor that Jen and I both love. That's come out. That's considered new. That's very different. I also look at Tile Blast. While not necessarily new, is inspired a little bit from Mahjong and other games. Tile Busters came in, and that hasn't been really seen before. There were a lot of games in that category, but that game brought it to the map. Going back and taking popular mechanics for smaller games that were tested, maybe hyper casual, and then resurfacing them as polished puzzle audience targeting, new style, new engine style games. So a lot of them, I think, from a player's perspective, would feel new. Even from a game developer perspective, would not, because they're inspired by things we all are very familiar with. What I will say is 2 points. One, where I'm starting to see new trends is actually TikTok. So I've been saying banging my head against the wall saying it is a great platform for getting game visibility, but your content has to be catering to the audience that likes TikTok. And what I'm starting to see are voice-based games on that platform. So new trend, is it going to be huge? Is it going to be the next match 3? Probably not. Right now, and maybe I'll be correcting myself at the 400th episode saying I got it wrong. But I don't think right now TikTok is going to become necessarily the next gaming platform, but they are doing things that we haven't seen before that could be considered quite different. But I do agree with Kress. I do feel like the mobile, at least the casual mobile market, does feel stale. I used to be covering soft launch games maybe every 2 weeks, and now it's a more copy of what's already done, that proven better new. When they're making it, they must think that like, oh my God, there's so much new stuff in here. No, it doesn't. It's not new. It's been done.
Yeah.
It's been done by 5 other games, and yeah.
The hybridization and everything is like a soup of, I'm going to take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and like mix it up in a soup. Feels like the new strategy. Kress?
Yes.
Completely changing subject. But in terms of like emerging trends, I just thought about this, is that the gaming market in China.
Yeah. Oh,
for
yeah.
console,
For sure.
Like, and PC, like that's something I would never have predicted. So Steam just taking off and basically growing that market in this dramatic fashion. Of Wukong and all that kind of stuff that's going on, despite the fact I was just in Hong Kong and Singapore, despite the fact that the China economy is in absolute shits right now. Like it is a really, really scary what's happening with the underlying economy, particularly on the private real estate side. And so like the gaming market is booming while the economy is absolutely just flatlining, which actually We should get Mishka to look at that from a macro. Since he's our macroeconomist, let's see what his opinion is on that. But I think partly is because all these games are getting approved, so that's like, just growing the business. But anyway, that's an emerging trend that's really interesting. Not innovative on the product side, but definitely something that to be watching going forward.
Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Xsolla provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Xsolla, powering game developers to achieve global success.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance. All right, let's talk about a couple of key podcasts that we liked from the history. I think some of you pulled some favorites.
Secret reveal. If you found Deconstructor of Fun on TikTok, I'm like half running that account, testing different content for it. So in the process of cutting up some of the interviews, I've obviously watched them because I have to sit and divide them into little segments. And one of my favorite was actually Matt Weibel's interview. I thought that was so fun. I thought he was so
With
charismatic.
Kress, right?
Yeah. And I loved when he was talking about how passionate he was with Hearthstone, and he was like the number one player. I thought, to be honest, I actually went back and I checked the analytics for all the videos. I pulled to Netflix. I just threw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. And the most popular by views video was actually our deconstruction of Legend of Mushroom with Ken. That got almost 20,000 views. That surprised me.
Really?
I was not expecting that.
Holy shit.
But by likes, my partner, Mark, was actually playing a game. I can't remember what game it was. And the text was way too small. So I took a video of him standing maybe 2 feet in front of the TV to read the text. And I just made a little caption that was like, what happens when you play an indie game and they don't make the text big enough? That actually got the most likes. So I was a little surprised at the number of content for that. There's been no viral pops yet, unfortunately.
Yeah, because every old person in gaming is like, that's me, and liked it. I am that person on a game team that they all hate because I have no vision anymore. And they do font size 4 on their mobile games, and I got the phone like this. But yeah, that's a PSA, public service announcement for please get an old person who can't see to look at your font before you ship it.
And then for Twig, I'd say one of my most favorites was actually the recent one with Jen and Adam talking about philosophical debates on product, because I absolutely love those.
Oh, I thought you were in on that conversation too. Give yourself credit.
I was in there too.
No, let's move that to the shill section. That was a shill. Come on.
Yeah, it was fun that it was a little bit more esoteric. Mr. Telfer.
My favorite pod is the Valorant origin story. I really like listening to any podcast which talks through origin stories of big games in terms of all of the trials and tribulations that they went through. Just because I think in general, successful games are a lot messier than I think people think. So I'd love to do more of that. And I also agree with Laura. More philosophy. I actually really enjoy Joe Kim's series, Philosophy Friday. We're hearing from a whole bunch of different leaders who have different perspectives and different frameworks about how they look at problems. So I really like that.
Super quick Valorant story, which often doesn't get told. I don't know if it's because it involves a woman or if it's more because it's more operational based. But when I was at Riot during the Valorant birth, they brought in Anna Dolan, who revolutionized League of Legends, like operations, like how do you get champions out? They brought her in to head up the Valorant team. And nobody gives her this credit, but she is the one who came in and like got that thing organized and got it to ship and set this amazing culture. She's a beloved leader, just a kick-ass woman who's leading that team. And I'm not sure that she gets enough credit for the role that she's played, kind of maybe even back a house. I know she's on camera sometimes, but everyone always, talks about, oh, the game design guy was fucking amazing. I don't think we give enough credit to the people who actually like organize it and ship it and get out the door. So kudos to Anna on that. Let's go quickly through a couple of things about how we meet up in person with folks at events. I wanted to talk about the Think Games Istanbul Summit that actually you mentioned, Laura. I think we're going to be on our 4th year coming up. It has like 1,000 people that go to this. I'd never been to Istanbul. I think this is where we actually met John Wright from Quali, and like he's now like our spirit animal or something like this coming out of these. We also got to record, do these different things in person. So Kress, like, what has Istanbul or meeting people up in person been for you?
No, I think the Istanbul event's definitely a highlight, particularly the second one where it was well after COVID. So there was like 1,000 people there. I did the keynote. I let Apple have it about IDFA ultimately being dead right on the impact and the rest of the adjustments that was made in the marketplace, frankly. And the first time kind of the fans were there in droves, like kind of really appreciating the podcast. The Israelis were there in force, which was awesome. There's a dozen Areem folks in their vests looking like a legion of nerdy Secret Service. But it was an amazing event, and every year it continues to deliver. So hopefully next year will be amazing.
I actually don't do in real life, so I've never been to these events. I'm not sure why you're asking me.
He doesn't get out of the basement.
I go to GDC every year, and I really enjoy GDC. And I actually remember when we did our first event at GDC for Deconstructor, they made the mistake of making me the person that ran the event. It was in a small bar that filled up in seconds. I totally messed up, underpredicted attendance, and the whole place was just absolutely rammed with people. I don't think anyone could actually talk. And then after that, everything got way more professional. But yeah, lots of great memories of then, as well as the following years that people met and feedback shared.
Yeah, the GDC events, it's the first time I understood what a parasocial relationship is, where people just walk up to you and they start talking to you because you're in their head every week. And in my head, I'm going through the mental, like, oh, crap, do I know this person? Who are they? And then I'm trying to play the game of figuring out who they are. So if you do meet us in person, please take a moment to introduce yourself, even if we may have met before. It would be lovely to have that helpful hint and that helpful reminder. Okay, I'm going to go back up to headlines. That concludes all of the milestone celebrations for 300. Thanks for sticking with us. And thank you guys for coming on and doing story time. It was great to get your origin stories. All right, so a couple things going on. Ooh, this is a good one. If you like legal battles, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company sue Palworld for patent infringement. It isn't about the IP infringement. So you could kind of tell in the background that somehow Nintendo and the Pokemon Company were figuring out what to do about this. Apparently, there's like a killer patent that they've put out there that revolves around the mechanic of actually how you catch a Pokemon. And this was kind of interesting. During the same time, it's been rumored that Krafton is looking at a mobile release of Palworld. That came out of mobilegamer.biz. Thank you, Neil, for that little take. But I'm fascinating to see the legal drama. Kress, have you heard anything about this stuff?
Well, actually, do we know that that's the patent that they're talking about, or are you speculating?
I saw that in an article. So apparently what the Palworld developer posted was, they have sued us for patent infringement, but we don't understand which patents. And so someone, I think, speculated and put some stuff up that it was this mechanic.
Right. So unfortunately, we don't know. I think we do not know what the actual patent is that they're infringing. So that makes it really hard to qualify whether they're doing it. So from my take on this is that they clearly did not go after copyright, which was the obvious one because they were copying characters, and that likely they felt like probably wasn't a good case for them. So there's either two options really at this point. Like, it's like, why did it take so long to build this patent infringement thing? Are they just doing this to go after them, or did they build up a huge and really like substantial case against them over the last few months? Which is the second one is always the most likely with Nintendo, right? Because What you have to understand about Nintendo, they are fucking ruthless about copyrights and ruthless about patents, about their technology and their IP. And so they will not stop, right, until Palworld is like smashed into little bits, right? It's just not in their nature to stop on these type of things. Their legal rep is Jenner and Block, which is one of the largest like fucking intellectual property rights law firms in the country, if not the world. They are not to be fucked with. They have like tons of others on retainer, like Cooley in the Bay Area. In my opinion, this just cannot end well for Palworld, right? But again, we need to see what these patents are to see how valid these cases are. But I don't think they would bring this without a really, really strong case and bring these lawyers to bear. And again, they will never stop because that is the way Nintendo rolls on this sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I'm speaking from firsthand experience of being fucking drilled by this fucking Cooley Godward thing on a case against Nintendo, which we won, actually.
Cool.
Copyright
Congrats.
case, but patent case. But anyway, yeah, they're ruthless.
Got it. All right. So the next topic is, Phil, I'm going to tag you in on this one. Dreamhaven unveils the first publishing partnership with FuzzyBot's linked banner of the Spark. You wanted to chat about this. What's going on?
So Dreamhaven's kind of like Blizzard Next. It's founded by Mike Morhaime, and it's been around, I don't know, for how many years now, Eric? Like, they haven't done anything. They've raised a lot of money, but they've never announced how much they've raised. And no one talks about them. And this is the first time we've seen them really say something material about a game. And they're going to do a publishing label. This is FuzzyBot, which is a new studio. It's a bunch of ex-Dice LA people. I used to work with them, and I played the game. It had, I believe, an alpha weekend. It's a very interesting title. It's a roguelike action RPG with some town builder elements. You'd almost think Animal Crossing. So we'll see if they can pull off that genre combination, as you were talking about earlier, Jen. But I think the broader story is like Dreamhaven finally starting to have some sort of material public appearance. They have 2 studios right now, and it was interesting doing the PR tour. Morhaime said that they have 100 people employed, 30 at Secret Door, which is one of their first party studios, and another 50 at Moonshot. And we're going to hear more about them very, very soon. But I expected them to make a much bigger splash much earlier, so I'm not quite sure what they're cooking up right now, but this is coming to keep track of.
So they started in 2020. And my very, very, very high level understanding is that they are not going after big AAA type things. They're basically becoming like the indie type. They're doing indie projects at first anyway. And look, actually, with that only 100 people, they're not going to be building, competitors to products that they built at Blizzard. So I don't know. Should be interesting to see what they come up with.
So you don't think this is a publisher that's about getting the band back together, the Blizzard band back together, and like the Phoenix?
Yeah, but my understanding is it's more for the love of creating games, not for building the next blockbuster AAA. So, okay. But I may be wrong. That was just kind of my early understanding of what they're trying to accomplish with their first couple projects.
Got it. All right. The next topic, really quick, because I love to bring up things that trigger Kress. Microsoft spends $1 billion a year on Game Pass titles. This is from a Bloomberg interview with Xbox President Sarah Bond. They're offering a flat fee of millions of dollars to smaller publishers alongside a portion of subscription revenue. Phil, what's the math?
I just don't even think this sounds right. Like, if you think about the 34 million MAU that they last reported, and if you remember way back when we talked about the fact that they stopped reporting Game Pass MAU, never a good sign. But if you take their last reported 34 million number and you multiply it by, let's say, $10 a month, I get you about $4 billion a year in revenue. And if you're really doing $4 billion a year in revenue, why are you only paying out $1 billion in content fees? Like, I think you'd want to increase that much more. You'd want to make aggressive investments. So like, okay, something doesn't sound right. And the other thing that they never do with this accounting is they don't talk about the foregone revenue or the cost of first party titles. Like, they spend all that money to acquire Activision, to acquire Call of Duty. How does that get factored into the P&L? So a lot of that gets lost, but there's some scorched earth around this number too. Nothing to be proud of, I would say.
Well, and also this is not including all the first party development costs.
Yep.
Which is more than doubled probably with the Activision acquisition. So it's like, this is bullshit PR. Again, it's like, this doesn't mean anything because this $1 billion is for third party titles on Game Pass, right?
All right. Well, let's talk about more dead games. Laura.
So I picked up just that Everdale has unfortunately been put to rest again. So Everdale was kind of, you're building out a little forest town. You were chopping things. When did it launch? Soft launch 2020 under Supercell. They couldn't get it to where it needed to be. So then they ended up passing it to Metacore in early last year in 2023. Metacore tried to figure out what to do with it to see if they could revive it. And unfortunately, they have not been able to. I would have loved to see, maybe this is just talking about the soup of making new games, but Grid Merge meets Everdale could have been interesting. But if they probably tried that and it didn't work, couldn't find the right audience. But yeah, that game is unfortunately going back to the archive game, going back to the shelf.
Well, since Phil, you didn't run into Brawl Stars, let's run into Brawl Stars. Like, they are running up the charts. They are crushing it. I want to look at the SpongeBob John Cena promotion they just did to see if that had anything to do with it. What did you see?
So they are now in the top 10 grossing worldwide.
Damn.
It's very impressive. It hasn't slowed down. It has stabilized. They had the SpongeBob SquarePants event at the early September, which you're talking about. You know, if you just look at their run rate, it looks like this might be a 600 million a year game. But I would argue, like, you've got to think about where it sits on the pantheon, and that this is a marathon and it's not a race. And you start to look at lifetime revenue across all of Supercell's titles. So Clash of Clans is still sitting at $7 billion. You have Clash Royale in second place sitting at $3 billion. And then in a distant third place, you have Brawl Stars at $1.7 billion. And of course, like, all those numbers are good. No one's crying, but it is a marathon to accumulate billions and billions and billions of dollars. So Brawl Stars needs to continue this sort of pace. You know, if they continue to do $600 million per year, you know, they still have more than a decade to actually catch up to Clash of Clans. And Clash of Clans still doing well in and of itself. It hasn't slowed down in the last couple of years either.
Yeah, they have so much firing for them. Another game that's doing really well is Space Marines 2. Continues to crush it. Adam, what did you see there?
I'm playing it. Have you guys played Space Marine?
No.
No.
Not yet.
No. It looks like Gears of War, right? Is it very similar to Gears of War, third person?
Okay.
Oh, I should play it. I love that game.
It's fun. I like it. So VG Insights is estimating revenue at about 186 million on Steam only. I have a chart here which looks at the cumulative units sold in comparison to a whole bunch of different games over the last couple of years. So what's impressive is that within the first 14 days in a launch online manner, it looks like Space Marine 2 is roughly matching Helldivers 2. Helldivers had that kind of viral growth and kept going, versus Space Marine is kind of coming out, matching Helldivers now, but looks to be roughly flat. So it's beating Manor Lords, it's beating most sort of like co-op shooters, so things like Remnant 2, obviously beating that, multiples higher than that, but is, you know, in line with Helldivers now, will fall underneath it. Baldur's Gate, Palworld, Black Myth significantly higher. A rule of thumb, I think if you kind of extend out this line, and then you start to say, okay, where can this end up? Keep in mind, this is Steam only. So right now it's looking at just under 4 million units sold in the first 2 weeks. You extend that out for the first month. Can they get to 4 and a bit million? And then you can start to multiply that to get out to the full year. So for example, if you look at comps, usually you're looking at like 1.5x to 2x their month one number to get to that year one number. So for example, Hogwarts, 12 million to 24 million for year one, versus Elden was 12 million to 20 million for year one, which all kind of depends on your discounting strategy. So right now, Space Marine 2 is definitely on great trajectory, especially given the genre. But what I would expect is that this is now following a typical sales curve, unlike what we saw with things like Helldivers and what we're seeing with Black Myth. So this should start to flatline through the rest of the year.
Do you think they can pivot into a live service?
No.
Can they just back into one? I mean, this has an online component.
It does, but I don't see the developer doing it.
They're talking expansions and
Yeah.
They have a roadmap.
They have a roadmap. I think DLC expansions absolutely make sense for this game. I don't see Saber going beyond that.
Speaking of which, this is a Embracer team, right?
Yeah, this is Saber.
Yep. Like their last game was World War Z, which did not perform anything close to this, right? Like this is a large multiple over what Saber typically does with these kind of more licensed co-op shooter games.
Cool. All right. What else we got, Phil?
One last update, an oldie but a goodie. Raid Shadow Legends has cemented itself as the number 2 squad RPG in the United States. It is now at $9 million in monthly revenue, according to Sensor Tower. When you look at the time series for this game, it has been extremely impressive when you compare it to other Western squad RPGs. So if we look at it compared to, say, let's say Galaxy of Heroes, in terms of monthly revenue, it's largely maintained its pace over time. And you start to see a lot of softness in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes numbers around 2021. But Raid Shadow Legends continues to pump a pretty stable number out. When you even start to look at where it sits in terms of cumulative revenue since each of these games launched, Galaxy of Heroes has done $1.2 billion according to Sensor Tower, and Raid Shadow Legends has done about $1 billion. So this thing is on pace to actually overcome Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes and potentially be like the number one squad RPG in terms of revenue in the West, which is extremely impressive for this team. I thought there were a lot of design problems with keeping squad RPGs going for long periods of time, but to their credit, they've seemed to stabilize a lot of metrics and have reached some sort of equilibrium. And it's even more impressive when you start to look at downloads, because it's not as though they're punching above their weight when it comes to downloads. It's really about maintaining the user base they've had and continuing to monetize them. So props to the team over at Plarium.
Yeah, impressive. What's getting impressive is that some of these traditional older games are finding ways to stay alive. Like Brawl Stars coming back from, I don't want to say the dead, but they were kind of, not doing good, and like Raid figuring out how to come back. I think that's kind of the next strategies. Many times we kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, but maybe there are turnaround. Maybe there's a whole like topic on turnarounds that we should look into, is like what game has really figured it out and turned around, and what was the history to that. And maybe Playtika is going to do a turnaround because they have agreed to acquire Superplay, a mobile gaming company in Israel, for a price ranging from $700 million to $1.95 billion. So Kress, please explain to me what's going on with Playtika. Why is buying someone for a range? How does that even work? What's going on?
All right. So Playtika acquired Dice Dreams, which is an amazing game. Also another copy of Coin Master. The game is doing really well. They bought it for anywhere ranging from 700 million to 1.9 billion. So this is very similar to the deals that Zynga was doing for a while with Peak and Graham and one other. What's the other one? Anyway, but it does feel a lot like the Zynga type strategy, where they're expanding outside of their core genres by acquiring big companies that are already scaled and scaling. So I think this is actually a really good buy for them. Playtika has kind of been in the mud for a long time. Their stock is just at an all-time low, and they just need growth drivers. And so this gets them there pretty quickly. Having said that, their earnouts are pretty egregious. So they're only paying 700 million up front, and the rest is going to be an earnout. So in essence, they're going to have to pay this out probably over the next 3 years. So the question is, how profitable is that going to be if they hit these targets and give these earnouts? But likely it's structured so that they make a certain amount of profit no matter what level of revenue they do going forward.
Got it. So the range is from the earnouts.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And so this should be a long-term positive for Playtika in theory, diversifying from the core social casino type games into more of the casual social casino. I can't believe people are out there arguing that Monopoly Go is a social casino game. It's like, there's like a fundamental misunderstanding about how this market works from some pundits out there.
Because we're not arguing it on a market basis. We're arguing it from a design perspective basis. Like there's no fail state. There's a board instead of a slot machine. You got to pay attention not just to the market design, because you're thinking immediately about all the market implications about what it would mean if Monopoly Go is a social casino game. I could care less about that. What I care is from a design perspective, whether or not Monopoly Go classifies as a social casino game. That is important.
Do you consider it a social casino game?
So it has all of the mechanics that we know are consistent with social casino. So you can sit there and you can wager varying amounts of money, right? You can go to 100x, 200x in terms of the amount of dice rolls that you can make. It is true that they have like these other, battle mechanics, which I would argue are not, an incredible share of a lot of their sync. A lot of it is just betting dice, rolling around the board and having probabilistic elements happen. That to me is a social casino game. It's instead of slots, it's this. I agree it's in a very new format. I agree about the casualization. We can split hairs on the genre definition, but it has all of the mechanics that make social casino have the really high ARPUs and LTVs that we talk about. It has all of those design staples.
Right. Maybe my distinction is on the audience side. Like, do you think that the core slots and bingo players are Monopoly Go fans, or do you think Monopoly Go attracted a broader audience?
Yes.
It absolutely has been genre enhancing. There's no doubt about that. I think the thing that Jen has mentioned, which I've remained fascinated by, but I would love to see more hard data on, is that Monopoly does really well in Vegas in terms of slot machines. Like that IP has been really successful. I mean, even when you think about like the, McDonald's game that's been around forever, like this IP seems to have a really natural fit with casino and gambling, and it feels just like Hasbro has never exploited that to the fullest extent. So I think part of the story is the casualization and the broaderization of social casino mechanics that we were talking about last episode, which I completely agree with, and I think that's a huge revolution. But I think the other piece is really finding IP genre fit. This was, a glove that fit perfectly.
Yeah, I think you and I are in agreement.
Yeah, this happened last week. Thank you for continuing it. But you generally agree. I think there's nuances around like what is the sensor tower definition of this and the competitive set. And I think that these games, even Coin Master, I would have argued, grew what was traditionally social casino, which was slot games, bingo games, poker games, or casino games, which combine many of those together. The idea of Coin Master and Monopoly Go, I think, created a new almost subgenre of social casino.
Yeah,
like there's no element of skill. Like you can wager varying amounts. Like those design staples that we'd see elsewhere. I'd love to see some mechanics in other games.
What about the user acquisition profile of something like Monopoly Go, Coin Master, or Dice Dreams? Right? Do you think it costs as much to acquire those users as it does to acquire social casino users?
I think they absolutely unlocked a new CPI profile.
Correct.
I mean, that's part of the casualization that we're talking about.
So basically, besides the core mechanics, everything seems to be different about this particular game versus social casino, which is kind of my whole point, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
It shouldn't be called social casino.
It's a social casino Trojan horse, where to a player, the brand and the mechanics like completely hid. It's like what we talk about with Whiteout Survival all the time, how you come in thinking it's a hyper casual game and the next thing you know you're playing a 4X game. I think the same thing happened here. You come in thinking you're going to play some version of Monopoly. The next thing you know, you're trapped in the hell of social casino.
I completely agree. Like there's a far broader appeal to watching your piece move around a Monopoly board and having the anticipation of what event is going to happen when you land on what piece on the board. That is far more accessible than pulling a slot lever and seeing what combo is going to come up in a slots machine, because there's so many different winning combinations of slot machine. It's hard to know what's happening. And so I think it's the casualization of that lever pull. They've made that lever pull really exciting.
Yeah, there's just more stuff going on. Anyway, let's get back to Playtika buying.
Well, it's relevant in the sense that because Playtika, this is expanding their gaming. Like if they clearly will not put Dice Dreams in their social casino slot, they seem to think it's a different type of game, and I agree with them.
Oh, so interesting.
This is really good for Playtika. This is part of the thesis we talked about months ago about Playtika, basically saying, hey, a year ago they're like, hey, we're not making any more games, right? Like what?
Yeah.
Excuse me? And then they went through this whole PE type thing. I think they tried to reduce costs, try to sell themselves, didn't work, and now they're basically back on their game, making new games and making acquisitions. And I think this is part of their kind of first, actually it's a big hit, big swing, in terms of getting back to profitable growth. So this could be the next Zynga story.
Yeah.
When I first started covering them, they were in the shit doghouse until Frank took over and acquired all these, great assets. So let's see if they can continue. And honestly, this is the time to do it. I mean, I thought the price was a little high, generally speaking, but it's such a profitable game. I imagine it makes sense. But because the market's kind of in the shits and the valuations are so much lower on mobile games because of the Apple draconian privacy policies, they should be able to consolidate with the balance sheet that they have and the access to capital. So
the game is ripping. Dice Dreams is absolutely ripping right now.
Yeah.
They're 2x up year over year. They did $21 million in Q1 23. They did $50 million in Q1 24. Quarter over quarter, it's only 14%, but that's still pretty impressive. So even if you just throw a 5x multiple on this, you're looking at 1.5 billion. So it doesn't seem that crazy to me. The question is really, to your point, Eric, what do the CPI profiles look like? How casual is this game? Do they see a higher ceiling than what it has right now? Because they're betting on that, right? They're betting on this game growing. And I think it really comes down to what's happening on the CPI side.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, if they can continue to scale it. Overall, I think very positive for Playtika. I don't think the market's really understanding the benefits that they're going to have.
Yeah, I think this acquisition strategy is incredibly smart right now, given, number one is how difficult it is to assemble a team, make a game from scratch, because you have to take a lot of swings, a lot of at-bats. Sorry for the baseball analogies, but you have to take a lot of swings before you actually hit something. So why not, pay a little bit of a premium and take something that's working, put it into your system and make it better? It's a lot of what Scopely's strategy was back in the day, Zynga's strategy. So this makes a lot of sense. Laura mentioned that Dice Stream's revenue is growing while Board Kings is in decline. So that's kind of interesting. I think Monopoly Go and the, like, let's make dice slot machines is the new extension in this world, right? And so games with dice and boards might be just visually more appealing because people are like, oh, I liked Monopoly Go. I now want to play another game that does basically the same thing with that I'll say mechanic. It's just like a skin of a mechanic, right, Phil? I feel like that's how that's.
It is, but I think, you know, what again, we were talking about last episode. What do you take away from Monopoly Go? Like, I'd love to see games like Life. That's one of the old board games.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what could happen if you use the wagering board mechanic and then layer on life events? Like, how do you kind of pick a different meta structure, but kind of keep this idea of spend velocity high? Because that's what's attractive about Social Casino to me. Is you can sit there and you can say 200x in one roll. You can discorrelate engagement time with monetization, which is something that Match 3 has struggled with. Like, you have to sync more levels, you have to play more. But Social Casino has disambiguated those two things, and that's how they get spend velocity super high. That's how you get super high LTVs. I remember we were looking at LTVs in the analyst group at Scopely way back when, like 5 or 6 years ago. And we all were taking bets on who had the highest LTV, the single highest player. And we all were like Walking Dead Road to Survival, which I know you worked on, Jen.
Yeah.
Like mid-core, obviously. Turns out it was Scopely's earlier slots games. Ironically enough, they're dead ones they were no longer developing. And I think that just really speaks to like this unlimited spend velocity casino can have. And I think it's just about, can we find other interesting casual metas that solve the CPI problem and also do something interesting? And I think about Game of Life, but I don't know. If I was Scopely, I'd
Go.
I mean, you can't turn down like taking another shot at this. Like, what else can you do, you know, with this template? You know, if I get Massimo, get him another team, get him another creative director, and like let's crank.
That's actually really smart.
Yeah, I love that. And oh my God, I had lunch with a friend who listens to the podcast, and he's like, Jen, as soon as you say, I don't know if you know, but I used to work at a toy company. So I'm going to tell a Wayback Machine story really quick because my friend loves these stories and it relates. So I used to work at Hasbro. I used to, do all of the Hasbro games. And so Game of Life has been a premium game available on the app stores for like 20 years. And like, if you go on the store today, you will find Game of Life for like $3.99 or something like that. It is still one of the only games that is up for a premium price that still sells. Now, it doesn't sell a lot and it's changed hands over time, but Phil, I think you're super smart to say, why don't you go back, mine these IPs that people know and layer on some of these new, casual plus social casino elements to it. So Barry Dorf, if you're listening over at Hasbro, go like pitch this idea
where's my
right
hidden
now.
Object clue game? Where's the obvious shit? It like feels like there's a real treasure chest of IP. I mean, just looking to be matched with a mobile meta.
Yeah, I think people haven't done that. To your point, I'm as someone who, a lot of what I did back in the day was try to do literal interpretations of the gameplay. Although I think what you're bringing up is really smart, which is how do you just take the IP and Kress? This goes to what you said last week, which is fuck all of your guardrails. Just go take the IP and go do crazy shit with it. And I think if somebody mined these old IP libraries with that idea, is there the next kind of gold nugget in the 1849, like, let's go sifting for gold? That might be a place to go look. All right. That wraps it up for TWIG 301 or 300.5. We will see you next week.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry's best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand. Or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.